Welcome, Kris. I'm so happy to have you here. How are you today?
Oh, I'm pumped to be here, Catherine.
It's my pleasure, absolutely pleasure to see you and to work with you and to have you on my podcast. You are such an amazing person. And you know, uh, we usually start with the story. So the floor is yours and share with us how actually you became so organized as you are now.
Well, see now, I love that you started off with that because being organized actually doesn't mean anything. Because I'm organized, but I just kept reorganizing myself for years, thinking, okay, I just gotta get more organized. And people who aren't organized think, well, once I'm organized, everything will be fine. But I would tell you that you don't change the framework. You just it's almost like taking a screwdriver to a screw. When you just try to keep reorganizing yourself, you're just tightening it and tightening it until you sort of strip the screw, right? So here's how it happened for me. Um, I started my business 14 plus years ago. My initial business was about market and market messaging. And the first couple of years I was in business, I worked insane hours. And my husband said I was always stealing from sleep, getting up earlier and earlier and staying later and later. And you know what? I was told about the 2-year mark that I was starting to lose some of my charm because I was just tired all the time. And so I thought, you know what? This cannot be. Here he is, my biggest fan, my family's supporting me, and I'm doing all this stuff. And I just can't be that person. So I literally went from working 16 hours a day down to 6. Now, that did not happen overnight. That's a whole thing on its own. But let me move this story forward for you.
Mhm.
Luckily, I did that because it was a couple years after that that my husband was diagnosed with colon cancer. And I was pulled away from the business for about 2 years. And when I returned after his passing, my existing clients had no idea of my absence. And they kept coming to me saying, like, how could you have been away and we not know? And
Mhm.
if you could do that, maybe you could help us get to our kids' soccer games and start getting our life back. And so I started to realize that the people I worked best with or needed my help the most were the ones that looked good on paper, had been in business a while, were making money. They were the go-to person for a lot of people in their life. They got stuff done and they just kept thinking, well, there's too much to do, right? And that's not the case. So that's when we started working with them with their team, their time, and their toolkits. And as my clients say, they get 25 hours back a week within the first month of working with us. And just really building a business that should support your life instead of consuming it.
But your story is actually so touching. You just shared with us about your husband's condition and everything that you have been through. Like, um, as entrepreneurs, we tend to wear so many hats. And when something so, difficult and important in our life happens, even then it's even more difficult to build a business. When is the right time to outsource, to have a team? And why is that so important?
Yeah, because take all the emotion out of that story, Catherine. At the end
Hmm.
of the day, everybody, when people would try to bestow sympathy upon me, I'd say, look, everybody has something. This is my something right now. But the reality was life has interruptions. And if after losing my best friend, if I had to go out and look for a job and then try to be charming in an interview and learn a new job, I was not in that headspace. So you truly do need to have a business that can, that you don't constantly have to be pushing that rock uphill. And step one of that is really having a team.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting because so many, entrepreneurs are like, oh, Kris, I tried that. There's all these amazing opportunities for us now that you can absolutely afford looking to get high skilled, amazing talent for 5, 6 US dollars an hour. And they're like, I tried that. It didn't work. But here's number one. Here's the mistake number one.
Hmm.
They are using the formula of corporations traditionally that have not worked. And even corporations are now starting to change their tune. But it's a very parentified formula where your supervisor, your manager, when you had a job, checked your work like a parent or a teacher. And that became their job. So, like, if you were really good at sales, Catherine, and you got a promotion, you'd be the sales manager. Well, then you'd be supervising the sales team. Well,
Hmm.
as entrepreneurs, we don't have time for that. I need you to take stuff off my plate so I can get to the real work, so I can bring in more revenue, so I can do these things that I have all this hunger and ambition to do, whether it's write a book or have a podcast or whatever your next big dream is.
Mhm.
And so that formula doesn't work. So hiring a VA and finding one, we've got a 12-point hiring process with a 90% retention rate. And we do that for our clients that work with us as one of the things we do just so we can get that set up and get to the real work, which is putting some systems in play. But understanding when you think, I've tried that, it doesn't work. It was the basic setup. And you have sadly been raised in an institution that had a lot of flaws in how they set up teams, because team is a philosophy, not a number. You could have a team of one.
Mhm. Mhm. This is a gold mine. Team is a philosophy, not a number.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really
And
good. Mhm.
And so here's an example.
Mhm.
We often talk about teams and culture, and you might think, well, that's when you have like 50 people or 500. So I want you to imagine this. Let's say, Catherine, you're on an ocean liner, you're on vacation. I know you're just traveling, you're doing some amazing adventures.
Mhm.
And so let's say you're on, now that you're home and safe, I can give you this example. So let's say you're
Thank you.
now, let's say you're on an ocean liner and there's 500 people, and something happens to that cruise ship. And you're like, oh my gosh, I gotta find the entrepreneurs. I gotta find the other people. I gotta find the stuff that, like, who are these people I'm going to stick with that solve problems. I got to sort this out. And so in those 500 people, there might be 75 of those. And you being a smart person, you're going to find them. But if we were in a rowboat and there's you and two other people in that boat, and there's a hole in the boat, you better make sure that everybody in that boat knows what's going on and is a strong team. You better have a team mentality. You better have a real infrastructure in play, because you need every bit of that. And this is where people think that, oh, when I have a small team, I can't have a culture, or it's not really a team. It's a virtual assistant. And then they turn them into what I call task puppets. They just dump tasks on them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they delegate, which is what I say, a lateral move. Delegating never works. The work has to come through you. It's just, you're the bottleneck. You choke it all up. So there's these fundamentals that no one is explaining to small business owners, entrepreneurs, founders, coaches and consultants. And it's just making you crazy. And you're like, okay, I don't understand. I just got to work harder. But this is a really big step towards working part-time and making a lot more money.
Mhm. Mhm. So we're actually empowering every team member to be the best version of themselves and to do the job the best they can without micromanagement, right?
Yeah, so that leads us into what we call our super toolkits. So our
Mhm.
super toolkits are our signature program. Now, we'll stay focused on team, but this is really important. When we onboard somebody,
Mhm.
SOPs, again, standard operating procedures in the corporate world and in most places, they're not written by the end user. They're static in nature, and they're mostly there to cover liability. Okay. And then often too, training gets muddled in on that. So then you have this person that you say, okay, I hired a VA, but I wasn't ready for them yet. And also, I have to pause here for a second and say, we're not an agency, because agencies, what they do is train the VAs how to do a good interview, and they help them with the resume, and then they get billable hours. It's just
Mhm.
something we do so we can get you to the real work, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So back to the super toolkits. Now, SOPs, they just get outdated really quickly. They're very clunky. They're very time consuming to make. And we've all had them in jobs that we've had.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only one that had a job where they handed me this manual on day one. And
Yeah.
I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose this job because I can't stay awake, right?
We called it the blue book.
Yeah, and who has time to write these manuals? So many entrepreneurs say, "Oh, Kris, you don't understand. I need a week off or a month off so I can get these SOPs." No, with our super toolkits, what happens is they're dynamic documents that constantly give you time back. They're just dynamic documents that really breathe efficiency. And the big difference between them and SOPs is their simplicity, clarity, and ease of use. Okay, so
Mhm.
now you got the VA using the SOPs, right? Sorry,
Mhm.
using the super toolkits. My God, we don't have SOPs. Okay, so
Mhm.
here's a quick story. I had a client. She came to us. She was referred to by somebody else. Now, I'm not saying this is okay, but it does happen a lot. Lots of times when we have meetings with someone, they're really stressed out, and often they may miss their first appointment with me. So I'm like, okay, it happens. I don't enjoy it, but it happens. So
Mhm.
we made another one. So she wants to work with me. We made another appointment. She missed the second one. I'm like, okay, we're out. We're done. We're done. Of course we're done. Right.
Okay.
So yeah, but she begged me, Kris, please, please. And I knew the person who referred her and she begged me, please. So I'm like, all right, fine. I'll meet with you the third time. So we met with her. Now, the funny thing was she helped companies that are $5, $10 million sort of in, revenue get ready to sell their business with systems. So she's like, how can you help me? I just have too much work. So many entrepreneurs say, Kris, you don't understand. I just have too much work and I can't keep up. Right. So I'm like, I don't know, but we can. So she, and I have these in clippings and LinkedIn and on my website from her actual sessions, not even her doing a rehearsed testimonial. She said when she started, she didn't tell me this at the time, but she was taking sleep medication because her adrenaline was so high. She was working so many hours. She couldn't relax. She was doing all this stuff. Within the year, she made 4 times the amount of money and she worked 1/5 the amount of time. And within that year, she went to Costa Rica for a month with no Wi-Fi. And the
Mhm.
VA that we found for her ran the business. So it's
Wow.
just putting these simple things in play
Mhm.
that then free you up to
Mhm.
be able to get new business, manage new business, and really just keep moving forward.
And this is truly powerful because we
Yeah.
all need help with that. Please
Yeah.
speak more. What is the biggest myth when we want to build a team? What's happening there? Now I want to know much, much more. Come on.
Yeah. So the biggest myth, I think, is again, people are going to think it takes time, right? And that you have to do all this work.
Mhm.
When you do, their agencies are becoming very popular now for VA to
Mhm.
help you find a VA, but they hand you somebody and you're not set up for them. You just don't have things in play and they don't know anything about your company. But what I would say is the biggest myth is that you don't need to micromanage these people when things are set up right. And the biggest mistakes I would say with having a virtual assistant is what I call when you're dumping, delegating, or disregarding. You're just dumping stuff on them, almost like a child. Like you give a little toddler a bunch of blocks to keep them busy. Like, okay, I think I got enough for keep this person busy for a few days and I can focus on my work. And then if they're good at what they do, they come back a day later going, no, that's all done. And you're like, oh, I was ready for more. And now it's like the tail wagging the dog, right? So you're just
Mhm.
dumping stuff on them to keep busy. You're not set up for it. And then
Mhm.
also the second one would be, you're delegating. You're like, okay, the work has to come through me. I have to look at it. I have to set it up, and that just doesn't work to the point that then you're disregarding their skill set, because you're just dumping stuff on them. So you never really get to know what they're good at. So we had a situation a couple of years ago when the lockdowns were first just coming out. And somebody who was working for me for a couple of years is our social media manager. She found out within a week that, oh my gosh, she's in the Philippines. She now got accepted to go to school here in Canada. She had applied years ago and everything had been on hold. And then when she found out, she was given like a week to turn her life around. Now, first off, she wanted to stay on with us, which they all do because they love their job. It's a very different environment. I'm like, well, that's not realistic. You can't go to college to do this. So we again used our 12-point hiring process. I put something out there. I interviewed and I found Maura. Now, because we had the super toolkits, this is like now December 23rd, we hand over the super toolkits to Maura. I meet with Maura on January 6th, and she's up to 80% capacity because the super toolkits are so clear. It's
Mhm.
really like hiring a carpenter. If you can imagine, giving me a hammer isn't going to help, right? But if you have a
Right.
carpenter and they know the talent, then all you're doing is giving them the super toolkits to say, here are the measurements of the table. Here's how we do it. Here's all the passwords. Here's whatever.
Mhm.
And to that point, if you're going into your head right now saying, oh my gosh, but I'm so busy, I don't have time for that. What I would tell you is you make super toolkits as you go. When we work with our clients, it's kind of like Catherine, if you were in the kitchen right now cooking and
Mhm.
I walked in and I started helping you with your knife skills. Oh, you're cooking anyways, Catherine. Let me just show you some knife skills so you can cook faster and enjoy it more and,
Exactly.
get more done and be safer.
Mhm.
So all these things really truly matter. They're so subtle, but they're so powerful.
This is so powerful. When you're choosing someone from your team, obviously you have your system under quotation marks in place. How do you choose the right people and how a good team can actually help us to accelerate a business?
That's a great question. So we have a 12-point hiring process that
Mhm.
we go through, and
Mhm.
I'll even give that to you, although I've been doing it for a really long time. So people do tell me hiring is my superpower. But what I will say is we always hire personality over skill set. We
Mhm.
put them through a lot of micro testing. You know, when I'm interviewing, I do it in batch work. So I was doing some interviews this morning for a client, and the first interview might be like 2 minutes, right? And then I move them on to the next stage. But there's little things I do in there. Like I'll say, you know, hey, this is a quick interview to see if you make it to the main interview. Catherine, can you tell me why you'd be a good fit for this job? And, I'm looking for key things for you to engage and not to reintroduce yourself, and keywords you're going to use and stuff like that. Do you show up? Do you look professional? Are you alert? And then I can make that assessment in just a couple of minutes based on, how long I've been doing this. Then the first thing I will do is give them an email address that's different than the one they had. I'm going, you know what, Catherine, follow up with me. I'm going to give you an email. I even tell them so that they don't have autofill on their computer. And I'm saying it's different than the one you have. Follow up with me and say, Kris, you told me to follow up with you. You'd be surprised how many people, missed that or didn't do it or whatever. So there's all these
Really?
micro tests. Yes. There's all these micro tests that I put them through, and then I give them a mini test. And I say, here, I'm not looking for free work, but it's a test that will take them about 5 minutes, asking them to go get information about something. And I can see how they communicate, how quickly they get back, whether they make it on a spreadsheet, whether they send me a little video. So I put them through a bunch of micro tests to see how they work, how they communicate, how they think. And that really is a big part of how my clients are so happy with the VAs for so long. Yeah.
Mhm. Now the mic dropped. Like my mind is going round and round and round and round. But from one side, we have VAs. What if we hire agencies? For example, marketing agencies. Um, what is the best way to choose something like that?
Yeah. So now, I think when you're hiring anybody, right? So when you're hiring somebody, you want to get an idea of how they work. Now, when I'm hiring somebody for administrative role on my team, I would never, never, ever, ever hire anybody without giving them a test, right? I remember my first hire many years ago, and oh my gosh, it was a long time ago. And I had two candidates, and I was leaning more towards the guy. I just thought he was going to be a better fit.
Mhm.
And at the time, we were working with politicians in the area on this particular project. So I said to them, there was a local election. So I said, hey, could you give me the candidates for this upcoming election? We do a lot of work with them, especially right now. So sometimes it's great to give them a little project that it's quick, but also will benefit you.
Mhm.
So the guy was the one that I thought he's going to show up. And he said, and he was a young guy, but still, he said, well, I asked my mom and she said the candidates are not out till Tuesday. Well, I'm not hiring your mother, right? The female said, hey, they're not out to Tuesday morning at 10. Here is the website link that you'll need. Here is the list of suspected candidates that are going to run, but here's the link that you'll get. And I've also signed us up for an immediate alert, and they will notify you through email Tuesday morning at 10. Now, that was a very simple task I gave, but
Wow.
wow, did I get two
It's a
different results?
huge difference.
Huge difference, right? So to me, when I'm hiring anybody, that's what I'd be looking at. Now, if I'm dealing with a whole separate agency, that's a whole different kettle of fish because that's how they market and what's their brand, and that you're not hiring a person. But when you're hiring a person, there's all these little things that you can put in play to really give you a taste of what you're getting.
Mm. And again, mic drop. Okay, my mind is just blowing away. If someone wants to work with you, please help us all. How they can find you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can tell me that you heard me on this fantastic podcast and we'll become fast friends. I love hanging out on LinkedIn, but you can also go to free gift, free FREE gift, GIFT from Kris, KRIS.com, free gift from Kris.com. I put some real goodies in there for you, for your audience, Catherine. I put a free audio version of my book. So grab that
Sweet.
quickly. But yeah, listen, your business should support your life, not consume it. And business should be fun. It should be
Yes.
fun, or you could
Yes.
just be at
Yes.
that job you didn't like. So there is an easier way. I do promise you that.
I'm so glad we met. And thank you so much for being my guest. I think this is not going to be the only episode that you're my
Oh,
guest on because
I'll hold you to that, Catherine. I love talking about this
I
stuff.
never did 2 episodes with someone unless it's 2 different languages. But now I have so many questions. So most probably we're going to see each other on fall again and record another one and see how this is going. Because time is the most precious thing we have, the most precious resource, right? And you're really helping people, entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants to really free up their time and be with their loved ones while they're doing what they love. This is a very powerful mission, right?
And you make more money while you're doing
And
it.
you
So you
make
get
more
more.
money when
Yeah.
you do that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kris, for being my guest. I truly, truly enjoyed, and I hope you did too.
Oh, thank you for trusting me with your audience.
My pleasure. See you soon. Ciao.